Welcome to Truthful Manipulation. In a world where truth is bent, facts are framed, and influence is too often used without conscience, this podcast stands for something different. I'm Dave Kelsey, along with H. Daniel Mujahid, and together we expose manipulation, defend integrity, and help you see clearly in a world determined to confuse you. Welcome back to this week's episode of Truthful Manipulation. I'm Dave.
I'm Daniel, and today we want to give thanks to the one who sees what we miss, what we twist, what we dismiss, what we call politics, when it's really just things getting stripped by the tricks. What corruption do we ignore until it kicks down our front door? What lie do we excuse until truth doesn't breathe anymore? What do we tolerate, celebrate, decorate, then turn around and wonder why many in our nation preach hate? We don't just live in an age of information. We live in an age of fabrication. An age where lies don't always come with a villain's face. Sometimes they come wrapped in a flag, in a suit, in a smile, in a speech about grace. Sometimes deception says, I love the country, while picking the country's pocket. Sometimes betrayal holds a Bible high just to hide what it's in the other pocket. That's not patriotism. That's performance. That's not leadership. That's distortion. That's not truth. That's manipulation with a microphone and a moral abortion.
Yes, not just lies to be bold, but lies dressed cold in suits, polls, and algorithmic molds. Not allies whisper, not rumors on phones, but deception with donors, platforms, and thrones. They don't need truth to disappear in one day. They only need folks to look the other way and question it long enough, stretch it strong enough, repeat it wrong enough, and the lie moves on like it paid rent all along enough. And once the lie unpacks, truth gets taxed. Facts gets attacked, conscience gets cracked, then honesty walks in and they call it divisive. Accountability shows up and they call it vindictive. Justice takes a breath and they call it revenge. Cruelty gets loud and they call it strength. Silence fits the room and they call it peace. But silence ain't peace when the soul's on leash. When silence becomes the sound of surrender, a nation can lose itself and still call it freedom. We got headlines faster than heartbeats, sound beats louder than street speaks, clicks over conscience, views over values, truth over trial, and guilty says, don't let it leak. Outrage sold like dinner plates, anger served with a side of hate. Facts treated like accessories depending on the team, the tribe, the state. We get louder mouths and thinner proofs, bigger claims and smaller truth, more performance, less principle, more slogans, less spiritual. And everybody says, I know what's real, and too many only knew what their side lets them feel.
The age of deception is not just what people lie. It is when systems protect the lie and help the lie multiply. It is not just one crooked phrase. It's a made, a haze, a manufactured gaze where the people stare at shadows and call it better days. It challenges perception. It shakes conception. It makes revelation feel like public rejection. And yes, it's hard to accept. We only see with our eyes, because deception's first task is convincing decent people to normalize surprise. Denial is not discernment. Denial is not strength. Denial is often the first room deception rents inside the heart at length.
Let's say it plain. If you repeat it, they'll believe it. If you tweet it, they'll receive it. If you shout it, they'll retrieve it. If you frame it right, somebody will complete it. Wronging is still wrong, but wrong got a payroll. Wrong got a stage. Wrong got a halo. Wrong got lawyers, donors, and channels, feeds. Wrong got followers watering poison seeds.
This age has three weapons. Power redefines truth. Repetition replaces reason in our youth. Loyalty gets lifted above integrity. And once loyalty outweighs integrity, deception no longer hides in the alley. It stands in the center of the room and dares decent people to challenge the rally. That is what the lie becomes as a loyal test. And once the lie becomes a loyalty test, people stop asking, is it true? They start asking, will my side punish me if I say what I knew? This is not freedom. This is fear, wearing patriot gear. This is the soul whispering, I know it's wrong, while the mouth says, let me cheer.
Truth ain't a trend. Truth ain't a brand. Truth ain't owned by party or man. Truth don't kneel when the crowd gets loud. Truth don't bend just to make lies proud. Every generation gets tested when truth gets expensive. Do we stand up clear and get quiet and defensive, or do we speak when it costs? Do we stand when we're crossed, or do we sell our conviction and then complain what was lost?
Truth is not a trend. Truth is a responsibility. This episode of Truthful Manipulation is brought to you by the book, Truthful Manipulation, a roadmap to live by. If today feels like a storm of mixed messages, half-truths, pressure tactics, and polished deception, this book was written to help you slow down and see the pattern. We do not study manipulation so we can become better manipulators. We study manipulation so we can recognize it, resist it, and use influence with ethics, morals, and integrity. Truthful Manipulation, a roadmap to live by. For anyone who still believes awareness with integrity can change the way we live, lead, and treat one another. Find it, read it, share it, and start having the conversations most people are afraid to have. And now back to the show. Leadership is supposed to anchor a nation. But what happens when leadership becomes the source of degradation? What happens when the highest office doesn't serve the people, but confuses the people? What happens when accountability disappears and citizens are trained not to question what they see? What happens when law bends to a rich man's suggestion while working people are told justice is not complicated for your comprehension? That is how deception works. It doesn't always kick in the door. Sometimes it writes the rules, then asks you what rules are even for.
Courts in session, truths in recession, facts get spun like a backroom confession. Truth gets buried under legal expression. Wrong gets polished in technical direction. Was it corruption or a technicality? Was it betrayal or a political reality? Was it fraud or just strategy? Was it evil or just another rich man rewriting morality. That's how they play it. They don't deny it. They reframe it. Then the crowd repeats it until shame can't name it.
This is not about personality. It's about patterns of belief. It's about how a society can be trained to excuse what it used to condemn. It's about how fast people change their moral standards when the person violating them belongs to their tribe. This is deception at its deepest level, not when you feel your enemy, but when you convince your follower to betray their own conscience and call it loyalty. The most dangerous leader is not the one who lies. It is the one who teaches people to love the lie.
Pattern of deflecting, redirecting, misdirecting, blame collecting, truth neglecting, ego flexing, crowd connecting. One hand points away while the other hand takes. One voice screams fraud while the machinery breaks. Then folks watching get told, don't trust your eyes, trust the show, trust the spin, trust the noise, trust the guys. But performance ain't principle, volume ain't virtue, confidence ain't character, power don't prove, God is standing with you.
Leadership without humility becomes theater. Leadership without accountability becomes danger. Leadership without truth becomes manipulation, dressed up as destiny. And that is where the people come in, because no deceptive leader risks alone. Somebody finds it. Somebody excuses it. Somebody rejects it. Somebody says, that's just politics. Somebody laughs while the line gets crossed. Somebody shrugs while the soul gets lost.
When the cruelty becomes just politics, the people have already surrendered to too much of their humanity.
There is always a duality in deception. One side is external, what is said, what is done, what gets paid. Who gets protected? Who gets to avoid answering to anyone? The other side is internal, what we accept, what we excuse, what we choose, what we refuse, what we pretend not to know, because the truth might make us move. That internal side is where the real battle lives, because deception cannot fully succeed unless something inside us gives.
So who is deceived? The one who leads or the one who needs? The crook who pretends that his greed still feeds, the preacher of slogans, comforts, and creeds, the one selling flags, fears, guarantees, or the one who says, I know this is wrong, but still gets down on one loyal knees. That's the trap. That's the map. That's the spiritual slap. The lie don't always change you. Sometimes it wraps you in applause and traps you.
Tradition teaches us deception is not always loud. Sometimes it is polished. Sometimes it is proud. Sometimes it arrives as compromise. Sometimes as jokes. Sometimes as one small exception that nobody wants to provoke. Then another, then another, then another line crossed, until we no longer recognize the nation we lost.
Not horns and fire. Nah, it's suits and ties, strategic smiles, well-crafted lies, a wink to the base, a shift in the eyes, and truth disappears without counting goodbyes. Deception don't always ask you to worship evil. Sometimes it only asks you to stop caring about people.
That is the moment we must confront, because once we stop caring, cruelty becomes policy. Once we stop caring, lies become strategy. Once we stop caring, corruption becomes normal. And once corruption becomes normal, people forget what clean air feels like. They forget what truth sounds like. They forget what conscience costs like. They forget what freedom means when fear is dressed up like advice.
That's why truthful manipulation keeps coming back to ethics, morals, and integrity. Not as pretty words, not wall art, not speeches under good lighting, but survival tools when the world gets frightening. Integrity is how you keep your soul from being rented out by the highest bidder. Let me take 30 seconds of your time and talk to the person listening who knows something is off but can't always name it. That's why we created Truthful Manipulation, the podcast, the book, the conversation behind it. We break down how influence works in families, business, politics, faith, media, and everyday life. Because once you can see the pressure tactics, you don't have to be controlled by it. Visit truthfulmanipulation.com, share the show, pick up the book, and put it in the hands of somebody who still believes truth and integrity matter. And now back to this week's episode.
This beastly machine is not simply one person. It's the media cycles, financial incentives, political survival systems, and algorithmic rewards that cause the hearts of neighbors to worsen. It's a loop that feeds confusion until confusion becomes a way of life. And when confusion becomes consistent, clarity starts to feel unrealistic. That's how the machine wins. It doesn't always force you to believe the lie. Sometimes it just exhausts you until you stop asking why.
Loop it back, spin it fast, make it trend, make it last. Don't correct, just contrast. Make the present uglier than America's un-American past. Flood the feed, choke the mind, blur the line, steal the time. By the time truth walks in, the lie done went viral 9 more times. Speed the rage, feed the cage, turn the citizen into a stage. Make reaction feel like courage, make reflection like an age.
That is why the machine loves speed. Speed prevents reflection. Speed rewards reaction. Speed turns citizens into carriers of narratives they have not examined. And when people stop examining what they carry, deception gets free transportation. The lie doesn't need legs when people carry it for free. The lie doesn't need evidence when emotion becomes the key. The lie doesn't need truth when outrage pays the fee.
People say they want truth, but many times they want alignment. They want something that soothes their side, confirms their anger, and gives disappointment as assignment. Once the machine learns what keeps you angry, it doesn't feed your truth. It feeds more of yourself, louder, darker, less accountable, less useful. The algorithm doesn't need to know your soul. It only needs to know what keeps you from using it.
So the question becomes, who benefits from our confusion? Who profits when we do not trust one another? Who gains power when the public cannot agree on the basic truth? Who gets richer when outrage becomes the national bloodstream? Who gets protected when citizens become too tired to demand accountability.
The deceiver benefits, the corrupt benefits, the fear seller benefits, the division dealer benefits, the folks behind the curtain counting money benefits, while ordinary people fight over smoke, argue over slogans, and bleed over jokes.
That's why we must slow down, not disengage, slow down, not hide, slow down, not become silent, become clearer, because a clear voice can distinguish through the noise better than a loud voice with no truth in it. The remedy is not moral or noise. The remedy is disciplined truth with a voice. So where does this leave us? Not as victims only, but as participants. Every share, every like, every silence, every excuse, every laugh at cruelty, every moment we see inhumanity and say, this is not my problem. The age of deception survives because too many people participate without admitting they are participating.
You repost it, you endorse it, you distort it, you transport it, you stay quiet while they exploit it. Your silence becomes your voice to support it. And that's the goal of a corrupt system. Make decent people tired, make honest people divided, make moral people distracted, make courageous people quiet, make the public believe it can't stop what started.
But together, when we are united around truth, justice, and human decency, we can interrupt the pattern. We do not need to become louder voices. We need to become clearer choices. Voices that refuse to spread what we have not examined. Voices that refuse to excuse cruelty because it benefits our side. Voices that refuse to confuse faith with domination, patriotism with bullying, or strength with the absence of compassion.
Not rage, not mimicry, not comedy dressed up as courage, discipline, integrity, decency, the return of old-fashioned courage to say, this is wrong, even when my tribe wants me to clap it away. That's not weakness. That's moral adulthood.
Before you share, pause. Before you defend, examine. Before you attack, ask what truth requires. Before you pledge loyalty to any human being, remember this. Integrity is not owned by a party, not a personality, not a platform, not a tribe. Integrity is a covenant between your conscience and your conduct. If your conscience has to disappear for your loyalty to survive, you are not loyal. You are captured by those that thrive. A word to you, our listeners. If this conversation speaks to you, do not let it end. When the episode ends, Truthful Manipulation, a roadmap to live by. Use it as a guide for your home, your workplace, your leadership, your faith community, and your own self-examination. This is not a book about blaming everyone else. It's a book about seeing clearly, choosing wisely, and living with integrity. When manipulation is everywhere, go to www.truthfulmanipulation.com. Help us build a community that values truth over theater, character over comfort, and integrity over influence without conscience. And now back to the conclusion of today's show.
So what's the remedy? Not rage, not noise, not mimicry, not a louder lie to fight the first lie. not more smoke to cover smoke, not more outrage just to prove we woke. The remedy is discipline, integrity, decency, the return to more human clarity. Imagine that. Clarity is not a weapon to humiliate people, but a light to help people see other people like me.
Yes, this is the age of deception. It will not end with exposure alone. It ends when people choose truth, even when evil threatens to shoot, crucify, isolate, mock, or throw a stone. It ends when truth is not something we demand from our enemies only, but something we require from ourselves. It ends when we stop asking, what can my side get away with? And we start asking, what does integrity demand of me right now? If deception works, it's because it finds agreement somewhere inside us.
It ain't just leaders misleading the people, it's people agreeing because comfort makes lies feel equal. We trade in truth for a narrative sequel and then call it survival, but that ain't where good humans dwell. So check your feed and check your heart more. Truth may not trend, but it's worth standing for. Truth may cost friends. Truth may cost status when the fake crowd ends. But lies cost more. Lies take the floor. Lies take your name and then come back for your core.
Truth is not trending, but truth is what people went to war for. Truth is what mothers cried for. Truth is what prophets died for. Truth is what honest people keep trying to restore. If we stand on it once, they may try to shut the door. But if we lose it inside, we are not living the dream of America anymore. And that is for sure.
With gratitude, we give a shout out to our brother Louis J., dropping wisdom and insight every day. To the friends with voices of truth and consistency in the time that requires moral sufficiency, salute the truth tellers, the pattern breakers, the conscious shakers, equally the youth, America's new mind awakeners.
This is Truthful Manipulation, where we do not just expose the lie.
We refine the truth, unafraid of what some
try to deny.
Don't forget to like us. Pass this episode to a friend, a neighbor, a brother, a sister, somebody new who needs to hear it. And keep choosing truth with integrity, because the age of deception only wins when good people decide that seeing clearly costs too much. Truth only costs you comfort, but deception will invoice your soul. That's this week's episode of Truthful Manipulation. Please follow us at truthfulmanipulation.com. You can comment on today's show at truthfulmanipulation@gmail.com. Get a copy of our book, Truthful Manipulation, A Roadmap to Live By. It'll help you see the deceptions in your life. Have a great week. Thank you for listening.